Everyone. I'm Jennifer J. Raffler, your host for the Sol2Soul Global Summit 2. Learn the truth about our sun, how it heals us, supports our spiritual evolution, and more. Today's expert speaker is Grayham Forscutt, and what he does is wow. Some of it is a little over my head, to say the least. Very exciting, though, and fascinating. Grayham is a cosmogeneticist, starchitect, galactic astrologer, OBE explorer, and sub-Planck physicist and modeler. He discovered the music of the spheres as Fibonacci scales in music and introduced a modern universal language of light based on the English alphabet. And I'd like to share something that Grayham wrote for my request about himself, which he kind of had a hard time doing. He didn't like writing about himself, which is kind of cute. But this is what he wrote. All of a sudden, the Cutting Edge Collective expanded to include a galactic level of multidimensional awareness. I was old enough to be a part of this experience. It was as if a direct communication link had been established between Galactic Center and myself. Years later, with the arrival of the internet, many first wavers began to communicate with each other. New discoveries and teachings spread around the planet within a few short years. There was the Mayan calendars, the plotting of the earth grids, the 12-fold chakra system, 12 rays of creation, galactic Lyran human history, a new physics, many new healing modalities, and more. Astronomers were expanding their view of our universe, giving out-of-body explorers an extended playground to explore. My contributions included an organogram template for the social etiquette of galactic culture, a new galactic era astrology, mapping the stargates beyond the galaxy, plotting a coherent cosmogenetic family tree, designing a new form of light body Merkaba, modeling sub-Planck phase space, developing a new approach to playing music based on sacred geometries, music of the spheres, to name a few. Grayham's two websites are www.unifiedfractalfield.com and www.galacticastrologyacademy.com. Hi, Grayham. How are you?
Hi, that all sounds pretty amazing, doesn't it?
Yes, you are quite amazing. That's why I'm here today.
I hope I can live up to that one.
Well, of course you can. How are you doing tonight?
Great. It's 1 p.m. in the afternoon here in New Zealand.
Awesome. And I have 8 p.m. in Cape Cod. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Grayham, so much for joining us with the Sol2Soul Global Summit too. It's just wonderful to have you here. I don't know how I missed you the first time around. I guess it wasn't the time, you know. As always, it's in divine timing. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
You started pretty much when you had these out-of-body experiences. That's what my understanding anyway, that brought you to where you are now. Is that correct?
Yeah, this was like in the early 1980s. I was already about 30. Okay. And, you know, like most people in that era, they were doing either some kind of Eastern meditation or chanting, whatever it was. Lots of different techniques were around in that era. So I just sort of used some of the toning ones, and I was whirling like a whirling dervisher and doing the practices that were out there about learning how to astral travel, etc. And it sort of just happened over a period of, I don't know, a few months. And that was kind of the beginning of it, just kept on going, more or less.
Were you surprised or shocked the first time you had your OBE?
No, not really. It was part of a process. I was doing the suggested creative visualization type exercises that led to that kind of thing. And, working with my kundalini and my spine up through my third ventricle in the brain. And I had a fair idea of what was going on, and there was a certain amount of charge or sort of slight tingling and slight burning in my crown chakra, and all the different colors that people talk about, the amethysty magenta colors, and it was kind of like being led along in real time, one step, one stage after another.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Okay. And what did you see? Were you drawn to the sun?
Well, initially it was more about, it was like a training, an apprenticeship, I guess.
Okay.
Where my first kind of experiences was a combination really of creative visualization and experiential data sort of feedback. So when you're out of body traveling, depending on what faculty or what sense you're kind of predominant in, then different people can experience different things.
Mm-hmm.
And my first basic experiences were kind of like zooming around the house or zooming around the neighborhood. You're going to different places around the city and practicing that in different ways, and bit by bit. But as all that was happening, like this is over a 6 months to year-long period, as all that's happening, each time there seemed to be more information. I guess you call it a download. So more information about what to do next. And this led on to the study of astronomy and astrology and sacred geometry, and keeping a diary using the alphanumerics. The English alphabet is an alphanumeric system. So a lot of this was all sort of happening all together over a period of 6 months. So I had the luxury, I wasn't working at the time. And so I did it more or less all day, every day. I didn't have a family at that stage or anything, so I just ploughed into it 24/7 most of the
Okay. At what point did you see the sun stargate? Because in our communication earlier, you mentioned that you couldn't help but be drawn to the sun's stargate.
Yeah, sure. So the way to sort of approach this as an understanding is that whatever a person's really interested in most, what they're most focused on, once the out-of-body experience starts to take off, you just cannot stop yourself from sort of going there. So if, say, like a person's learning to remote view and things like that, if they're focused on perhaps they've always wanted to climb the top of Mount Everest, well, that's where they'll go. And so my interest was always, before that, I was always interested in the galaxy and the galactic centre, since I had read a few articles right there at the beginning of the 80s and the late 1970s. Some of the new astrology was talking about the relationship of our sun or our solar system with the galactic centre. Mm-hmm. So the experiences initially were I had drawn up on a globe which was about the size of a beach ball, okay. About just over 15 inches across. I had drawn up all the stars on a dark blue globe, and I still have it today. And I put the stars exactly where they are. It took me a long time. I drew exactly where they were. And so that ended up after my earlier OBE type practice sessions. I began to then focus on some of the specific stars. I knew which day was the best day to do it, and I realized that this was before the physicists I had sort of discovered or done the experimentation. I just knew for some reason that two locations can interact in real time no matter what the distance. All you need is the destination frequency or like a signal that could connect you. So somehow I kind of already knew that. And so my first experiences were more or less the real-time, I'll call it journey. And if you've ever come across Robert Monroe's teachings, he's probably the most famous astral travel out-of-body person, passed on now. He has the Robert Monroe Institute. He dropped the idea of talking about dimensions and talking about out of body in one way, and he started to call them focus levels. And I thought focus was a good word, because really it's where your attention is. So my first experiences of going through the sun stargate, I didn't even know it had happened. It was only later on, and it took 2 decades really of, although I had figured it out pretty early on, but it took 2 decades after that to really get together with all the research that was coming in from others, and the physics of it, the quantum mechanics of it, the astrophysics of it, the sacred geometry of it, etc., allowed me to put it together bit by bit. It's like going on a journey, like a psychoactive ingredient like DMT or something like that. You go on the journey. This is these famous people, John Lilly and so forth. They go on the journey, but they spend the next years trying to figure out, and plot and map where they initially went. So it's a very similar kind of thing. And so those first few journeys, I'd call them like first few journeys off planet and heading off into the interstellar realms, were kind of like trial and error. And although the feedback was exceptional, and I did meet a few, only really a handful at that stage, of non-physical somebodies, not very many. But as time went on, I began to develop this with more accuracy and keep a record. I've got a 700-page diary of collected insights and experiences, etc., which is some of the ultimate experience. So to begin with, it was like that experience, like the psychonauts, having their experience. It's only later they're able to sort of rationally understand and then create a map, a road map of how it happened and where it was and this kind of thing. So that was my experience in those early years.
Okay, so it's kind of learning as you're going along.
You're in that brainwave state, so you're getting real-time downloads as you're going. You don't even know they're coming. You can't even determine beforehand what is coming, but it comes. And if you're on the right track, well, you get the next stage of your apprenticeship, which I still feel I'm on. Of course, I'm on the apprenticeship now.
Okay, so you were attracted to the sun because
I was attracted to the galactic center. The galactic center was discovered or plotted or pinpointed, I think it was about 1937. And before that, the esoteric teachings on the planet and the mystery schools, etc., East and West, they didn't really focus on such a broad concept. They were mainly local, inner planes around the Earth, the atmosphere, the auric fields, the astral planes, the abstract mental planes around the Earth. They didn't really venture out. After the galactic center had been plotted, then at about the same time, 1940s and so forth, then some of the new teachings came along about the galactic framework of things. And a bit of theosophy kind of mentioned that. Alice Bailey, the Urantia book, kind of mentioned that in the 50s. And then what they call the Earth ley line, or the Earth grid, the portal mechanics, the portal points were recharged on the planet. They sort of came back online. And of course, there was a lot of people involved in that to get it happening. They'd been shut down since Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere during the mid-1900s, that grid came back online, and that's when you have the beginning, really, of the star families arriving. And the same the other way around. People could start to journey out through these Stargate portals and start to explore.
Okay. So the sun is a Stargate portal, correct?
Yes, and this takes, even though it's intuitively understood by many people and can be utilized and passed through without even knowing it. So that's all fine and good. I mean, there's people doing that. But there is a science around it and, a definite kind of quantum level and astrophysical reality that can describe that. And if you want me to, I can make a start on that. It's kind of, it's provable, but you would have to kind of do preliminary research before your rational mind would ever go, yep, okay, I'll put the tick beside that, I see what you mean. But it has everything to do with the planets orbiting around the sun. Of course, the sun's moving along, it's moving and orbiting the galaxy. It takes 225 million odd years to orbit the galaxy once. But the sun's moving along and the planets are carving out different paths, spaced out from the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So there's YouTubes that show this. And so you've got, and there's a number of new planets being discovered just recently outside of Pluto. So you've got these planets orbiting the sun. They're carving out helical paths. So if you were zooming ahead, if you went ahead of the sun and the solar system, you watched it coming towards you, then you'd see this. And you could put a map on it, a template. And this has been well researched and proven to within 99.7% accuracy. So the distances out from the sun that you would be looking at from the front point of view there, coming towards you, the spacing out to each of the planets, it would be based on what they call the golden ratio. It's the prime template, prime code there is in nature and in the universe, etc. And so the spacing out for each of the planets is based on this golden ratio. Okay. And then the actual orbital periods, which means the Earth takes 360 odd days, 65 days, Venus 224 odd days, and Mercury 88 or something like that. The periods of each of the planets are based on the same formula, the golden ratio. And then the speed, the velocity of each planet, they're all going at different speeds, but those are interacting and on a scale, like a harmonic scale, based on the golden ratio. So also what they call conjunctions, when the planets get together, synodal periods they're called, when the planets get together, well, they're based on this golden ratio as well. So the whole solar system is mapped out, and this is the same template that our own DNA helix and our DNA molecule is based on. So it's just a bigger version, really. So our own DNA helix is a stargate itself. We zoom down that stargate through our own DNA, and that's the sort of first step out. Because you don't need to know any of this to actually do it. But if you're a navigator and you want to sort of help others, then you kind of you begin to learn the science behind it all. So with this understanding that the solar system itself, where the planets are each spaced out in this template called golden ratio, spaced out from the sun, then the outer planets, the outermost ones, then inside that, then the next, like a symbol to understand what's going on, is that if you were to hug somebody and you're a huge person, you're one of these giants, you've got big arms and fingers and so forth, they know that the finger joints and our arm joints are based on the golden ratio. This is well known. So you've got this big person hugging a smaller person, but that smaller person, who's a little bit smaller, is hugging a smaller person, who's also hugging a slightly smaller person. They're all there as like a group hug. The smallest person is the innermost planet, Mercury, and then each other series of huggers around that. So you can imagine then that the biggest person, say, with the outer arms, the outer orbit path of the solar system, is squeezing a little bit, and that makes the person inside, they're hugging, they're squeezing, squeeze, and that's called, in physics, that's called compression. That's called negentropic embedding in words like this. So what it means in physics is that there's a squeezing going on. There's a pressure. It's an implosion of pressing inwards. And that is what creates the portal, the stargate through the sun. Planets are what creates the portal through the sun. It's like when you're about to make a Christmas cake or a birthday cake, and you get one of those sort of canvassy, squeezy icing cake things. It's like a cone, and you put the icing in there, and it's cloth, and you squeeze it, and then out squirts the icing, and you make patterns on top of the cake.
Yep.
So that squeezing is what's happening in the solar system. Planets are causing that squeezing, and you get squirted through the sun.
Wow. What a graphic. Thank you.
Now, it's taken time to work out like a nice sort of easily understandable way of sort of presenting that idea.
Okay, so there's already this force that's pulling towards the sun.
Yes, the sun's like a heart. It's a magnet. It's a huge heart. Huge.
Okay. So when you're having your OBE, that makes it so much easier to be attracted to the sun, to go through the sun, correct?
Yes, that's right. And once you understand that well, this is something I had to research, but the planets themselves, they get into certain positions. And as they get into certain positions, then the sun portal is more active. It's, for example, the movie Stargate, the TV show Stargate. You've got the circle there, the Stargate, the event horizon, and then you've got in the actual genetics and in the solar mechanics, you've got a 10-pointed or 10. It's called a mente. A mente, the famous saying is actually just change the letters around, and you get I am 10, which is a decagon. So Stargate is actually a decagon. You need in the movie you had to trigger each of those points of the Stargate to dial up and switch on the Stargate. So in the solar system, when the planets get to those positions, forming that kind of decagon. So when you get planets at certain points forming that decagon around the sun, then they are the optimum Stargate portal days. Coming the other way, this is the astrology I've done for 30 years as well. Coming the other way, those that are arriving into the solar system from the galaxy, the star seed and so forth, they arrive and come through the Stargate, and they kind of know as well the best portal days, and they arrive and they birth on the planet, and they leave that written as a map, written in the stars in their astrology chart. So you can see what skills, what archetypes, each planet's a different archetype, different bunch of skills. So you can plot what they've brought with them as far as skills, and it downloads from the solar system size DNA helix down into the physical, etheric, the Akashic level of our own genetics. So it's all very well plotted out. You can see it really, really clearly and easily.
You're doing this from the sun's point of view versus from the other astrology is from the Earth's point of view, correct?
Yes. About the mid-1970s, if I'm correct, it was the first, what they call an ephemeris, which is plotting where the planets are on a day-to-day basis. So as far as I understand it, they had to have computers to be able to plot where all the planets were from the sun's point of view. Up until that stage, the plotting where the planets were every day was from the Earth's point of view, like looking out from a telescope from the Earth. But if you go back to the old view of the electrons orbiting around the nucleus, then doing an astrology from the Earth's point of view is like being on one of the electrons and looking out, trying to gauge where all the other electrons are. They're not even in those positions. As soon as you go into the nucleus and look out at where the electrons or the planets are, you see for the first time where things really are, where the planets really are. So you have a different viewpoint. And this is the same basically as saying that our personality, our three bottom chakras, our physical and emotional and mental, that is what's living on the earth. That's the part of us that's living on the earth. But our higher self, if you like, or our soul self, or our abstract ideas and concepts and so forth, that's not living on the earth. That part of us is the other planets in the solar system, and more specifically, once you get in towards those words like higher self, then you're living in the sun. Your physical body is living on the earth. I'm sitting here in my room with my three bottom chakras talking to you. But if I was meditating or so forth, then there's another part of me called my higher self and so forth that is living in the sun. It's already there. It knows it's there. So it's a different point of view. It's a perspective. It's a reality, but it takes time to sort of grasp this reality. So when they say people are living in the sun, well, their physical body could be on the earth here. This is what the masters, the different earth masters, etc., their consciousness, or part of their consciousness, what they called the monad in Theosophy and Alice Bailey and Rudolf Steiner and that, the monad, that part of themselves, is living in the sun in a sense. But that means it's their consciousness which is reintegrated and has a real-time interaction with the forever ongoing information that's coming from the galactic center and feeding into the sun. So that's a different concept. It's not being in a physical body, living inside the sun. We can't take our physical body in there. It's too hot on the surface anyway. Though at the center of the sun, it's not hot. It's very, very cold.
Wow. So if we were to meditate with the intention of connecting with our higher self and the sun with that awareness, what would we see? I mean, everybody would see something different, but what is something that you think we may see?
Well, first I would just point out that when we go into the alpha theta sort of threshold there in our brainwave state, which is what we're doing. Say, for example, a person's a painter, an artist, a musician, a gardener, or whatever it is, if they're really focused 100% on their passion, then they'll tell you that's connected to their higher self, that's connected to the source, different words like that. So your consciousness has already gone through the sun, or going through the sun.
Wow.
And you could be working away on whatever project that you're focused. So for those people, they might not ever, well, I won't say ever because the future's sort of provide more details about it. They may not know that they've gone through the sun. It's only if you're sort of interested in the mechanics of it, as perhaps a mapper or a navigator, you start to sort of look and pay more attention to it. But because the sun, like the earth has the earth ley line grid around it, as do all the planets, and the sun has its energy grid as well. So to understand what you would see inside the sun, well, that takes a bit of time, but I've put a whole website together to try and describe that. Well, not only describe it, I've tried to model the physics of it. And I've presented this model to a number of cutting-edge physicists, and they can see the validity of it. So there is a way of mapping what you would see in the sun if your third eye was paying attention and you had that as your area of interest, so you would be able to see it in that sense. But it's not necessary.
If our higher self is in the sun and there's solar flares, coronal holes, etc., typically we get these reports on Facebook or wherever and we sit and wait. Okay, we're going to get that energy in 3 days, or that happened a couple days ago and now it's reaching Earth. With the perspective that you just presented, we would already be there and experience those changes in energy since we're already present. So instead of waiting 3 days for a particular energy from a coronal hole to reach the Earth, we already experienced that in a sense, correct?
Sounds good to me, yeah. So, and I believe that's the case to a certain degree for sure.
Okay.
Then we have our, we have our personal self, and we have the social environment, the climate we're living in. You know, and then you've got things like technology and so forth. So all that part of us is going to experience it 3 days later.
Okay.
So there's more to it. I wouldn't say that our higher self is like a somebody living in the sun. And of course, this is just my view.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the higher self is a template, and that template is called the golden ratio. But because
Mm-hmm.
the sun and the solar system, which I've just mentioned, is mapped out on this golden ratio template, then for me, the higher self is the template itself. And I've always called it a transpersonal higher self. It's not a person or an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And there's research these days, Lynn Claire Dennis, Dan Winter, these people have put together examples, real-time examples, to show that when we're meditating, when we're focused in our meditative state, and when we're feeling perhaps stillness, empathy, and these kinds of things, that our heart generates golden ratio frequencies, harmonics, which is the same as saying generates golden ratio spirals. And the pattern in the plasma, our auric field, the ether, if you like, is creating golden ratio patterns, golden ratio geometries, golden ratio forms, 3D golden ratio forms around our body, our auric field, called the light body. So in my perspective, the higher self is the template that all this is constructed on. And the more we identify with the template, then the more we are part of or are the higher self. We become the higher self. At a certain threshold, the higher self, or the collective endeavour of the perhaps like the society on the planet Earth here, for example, the collective pursuit of creativity, that becomes like an oversoul, an over higher self, meaning beyond any person. So the collective intent and the working within that, the projects that a person is involved in, that carries forth the collective goals, that becomes the focus. So the idea of a personal higher self dissolves. It's not needed. It doesn't really exist. And then when the work becomes like a focus on the projected goals of the cutting edge, if you like, or those that are moving ahead along the new timeline, different ways of saying it.
Geometry. Wow.
Yeah.
You're blowing me away on so many levels. These things that I've never thought of. I mean, you're bringing them up, and I hope our listeners are going to be as blown away as I am, because this is just wicked cool. Thank you, Graham.
You're very well. The geometry is almost like the after effect. It's the coherent emotion. It's the love and the compassion. It's the intent that's creating the geometries, if that makes sense. It's not the other way around.
Okay, so the intent is coming first.
That's right.
And then geometry. Okay.
But you can make use of it, like in town planning or landscape design or architecture or many, many other things. You can then, once you understand the template that compassion and empathy is creating, the shapes, the patterns, etc., then you can go ahead, and the designers of the planet, the designers of the new Earth, cityscapes, urbanscapes, etc., can start to apply these patterns, these geometries to build an urban design scape. Then you're walking around, you're living in and walking around an urban scape which is based on the shape of the heart. So this is sort of what's coming up in that sense.
Beautiful. Oh, wow. Wow. That would relieve so much stress, and to just be resonant and supported. And wow, that would be amazing. When you go into the typical city, it's block by block by block and very rectangular square buildings sticking up in the sky, and there's no golden ratio to be seen, at least that I'm aware of, for most of the major cities that I've visited.
And in the plants and the trees.
Well, yeah, but there's not many of them.
There's lots of people in different areas of creativity. This is why I've put together that organogram there. We've tried to present or initiate, as an example, the broadness of scope of creativity, that people can sort of feel like they can follow their passion, whether they're the photographer going into nature and photographing nature and bringing that out and putting it in a magazine, whether they're the social worker or the public service person looking after composting and designing composting toilets and things like this. Then all these different things are part and parcel of how the fullness of community or society, how it can all blend together and work together, focusing on what it is that we're really interested in, our contribution. How that becomes like the soul group of humanity, which is sort of like the apprenticeship required by the galactic community. Before we're invited to become members of the galactic community, we have to show and be an example of speaking the language and living the language, the light language, as they say, of what an advanced race is already doing. So that's sort of the rationale behind much of what I'm working with.
You are a starseed, and I imagine the people that would be interested in the organogram template, following the golden ratio and working on their mission or their passion and moving forward. You said these star seeds started coming in at a particular time. When was that?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that everybody that's interested in these and doing these things is what I would call a starseed. But
okay.
I would suggest that anybody that's creative and following their true passion, their true path, is adding and contributing. And there's a large number of starseed that are perhaps involved in that. As far as I understand it, and I can really only take the word of some of the initial information that was coming out in the early 1980s, where this is like the Ra material, the law of one. They more or less introduced the idea of starseed back then. And they called them wanderers, not starseed.
Wanderers, yes. Okay.
So they said that the starseed were incarnating back some 20,000 years ago.
Oh.
So that's kind of the end of Lemuria and right there in Atlantis. So starseed can arrive back in that era, if you like. That would be one way of saying that. And they start, Atlantis, what happened in Atlantis shut down the Earth grid. So they're more or less stuck here on the planet, going through the incarnational cycle. And like they have many incarnations. So starseed is not meaning first time incarnation here on the planet. Of course, many of them are, especially the younger ones born in the last 20 years might be having their first experience here. But the older ones, perhaps more than likely, and I see this in the astrology charts, definitely they've been playing out significant roles, even if they're not known about it, anything like that. They might not be recorded in history. They might be the mothers, the social workers, the nurses, or who in the past playing out these roles in their communities. So it's a broad concept. Starseed, I only know a bit of it, but I wouldn't say that it was only the starseed that were doing this. And it
Okay.
seemed a bit restrictive.
Okay. So anybody can contribute to that goal.
Well, they certainly are. They certainly are.
So your heliogalactic charts, when somebody presents themselves to you for a reading, what information do you need and what can you tell them about themselves? I saw on your website that you help starseeds remember. So what are they remembering?
When I just need the normal astrological information to start off, and then I'm drawing a chart up, which is from the sun's point of view, meaning that I'm plotting where the planets are from the sun's. But I'm not using the old astrology in the sense that I don't use the signs, the 12 signs. I don't use the houses. I don't use an ascendant. I don't use the moon.
Okay.
I use the latest information that I can gather, or that I have put together, from the galaxy, from where the stars actually are, from the real time, or from the quantum mechanics, people there who understand, have proven real time interaction is taking place. Like when you look at a star at night, that little orange light that's triggering and hitting your eye, that's a real-time interaction. Whereas the old physics, the old astronomy would say, no, that happened 25,000 years ago, or something like that. No,
Yes.
this is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Famous physicists like Walter Russell and some of these new physicists, they understood this. And you can have that experience. People do it all the time. They're lying out on the grass at night, looking up the stars. They look at a specific star, and all of a sudden they'll have an inspiration, an idea, a triggering, a download, etc., etc. So you're basically receiving a real-time interaction in some way.
Okay. So the normal information, would that be date of birth that you require?
Date of birth and city of birth. Time of birth, well, it's reasonably useful, not so important. Doesn't have to be exact. So the charts, it's mapped out there. I have to do a lot of it by hand because there's no other source that seems to be able to put it all together. So once I've gone through, added a number of different extra planets and asteroids, etc., then I have this map there. And I can tell by looking at that map which part or which star family that person has come from. They've left themselves a clear message written in the stars. I can identify where they've come from about 99% of the time. And then I can go about describing the expertise, the skills that they've brought with them or that they've mastered in those star family social environments. So I can identify what they are, and then I can clearly lay out a number of these skills, which become, when you link them together, one skill with another, with another, with another. And then these are what they generally would call the projects or the assignments that a person or a starseed, in this case, has volunteered to carry out here on the planet. But that's easy enough to do. And then to add to that, everything revolves around the position or the location of the galactic center. So I'm drawing up the chart as if there is already an interaction connection with the galactic center. And you only need to look at a map of the galaxy, or especially an image which is sort of drawn up from outside of the galaxy. See that at the galactic center there, it's not really a black hole. The new physics, the new astrophysics, plasma cosmology, electric universe, these new astronomers, they just know that there's not a black hole there. This is a super huge cluster of very closely connected solar systems, globular clusters of stars, etc. It's just enormous, and the light there is phenomenal in that sense, spiritual and physical. And so I'm drawing it up with that in mind, But then
Okay.
there's further than that, because in astrophysics or in cosmology, if you could go into the galactic center there, and you wanted to go out through the north pole of the galaxy, then as you were heading off out in the north pole, through the north pole of the galaxy, astronomers will tell you there's sort of jets of plasma streaming out of the north and south pole of the galaxies. In the new physics or plasma cosmology, it's not just a stream, a jet, it's a thread that runs all the way from our galaxy through the North Pole, and it's like a thread that goes, they call them Birkeland currents. It's a thread that connects galaxies together, one after another after another. It's like the chakra system at an extragalactic scale. And the North Pole of the Milky Way points directly at what they call the center galaxy of our local cluster, the Virgo A cluster. So it's pointing directly at its great-great-great-grandmother, the galaxy that birthed the quasars which become galaxies in our local cluster. So there's specific additions you can make to an astrology chart by, once you know some of these, like galactic and extragalactic angles and directions, etc. You can start to add that into the chart, because things interact over any distance in real time. So this is all kind of woven in there when a person is incarnating. If they're conscious enough, they'll bring in, or they'll incarnate, with a very specific intent. Read this.
Okay, and if they're not conscious enough, then that's when somebody may contact you for one of your charts to bring it to their awareness.
Yeah, for sure. In the sense that many people are, like most of the people I would attract to get their charts done, are already doing things like they're already teaching healing and teaching psychology, or cranial psychotherapists, or they're already skilled at some particular new area, and they want to just deepen their understanding of perhaps where they've come from, where they might like to expand, like to grow and advance some of their skill sets, and add more topics or projects to what they're already doing. So I get, say, the majority of people that contact me are in that genre.
Okay, so more of a confirmation, and maybe to gain a little bit more details, specifics about where they came from, and if they're on the right track, I guess.
Yeah, I do example charts just to learn more myself and help other people learn, like on my Facebook and so forth, and some of the groups. So, like for example, I did John Lennon and George and Paul McCartney, and sure enough, those three, they birthed on the points of the decagon when it's linked to the galactic center. So they're born exactly on these nodes, which is family genetics, soul family genetics.
Wow.
So there they are, the three of them. They're linked to the galactic center, so they've come here with a specific soul group mission. And then, of course, they've got their own individual skills, but, this is, you can clearly see it, the three of them there. And therefore, they manifested their assignment and more or less changed the timeline with a few songs.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, there's many examples of that.
Okay. So your chart, I imagine that you mapped out your own personal chart, probably, right?
Sure. I just did it first about 30 years ago. And,
okay. And how accurate do you think it was? I mean, is there anything that you could share about your own personal chart and your experiences, how it enhanced your life and your mission?
Well, when I first drew it up in, I guess it was the mid-1980s, it showed me in the chart that my links, or the planets and asteroids that were linked to the galactic center, were asteroids that were called Geometria, and Jupiter, and Scriabin is another asteroid, which is to do with the music, the Fibonacci music. So early on, I could see already that some of the things that I was already doing was exactly what was showing me in this style of astrology. So that was good right there and then. But there was a few others on these skills that I should have had back then, but I didn't have those skills. And so I started to learn them. And this was like quantum mechanics, physics, etc. I started to delve into them. And it took me a long time. I spent 20 odd years in-depth research on those topics until I felt confident enough to be able to publish it, which was about 2006, I think I published it. And it instantly became sort of cutting edge in those kinds of fields to some people that were sort of interested. So even though I could see my chart way back then, I could see I actually had to develop a few more skills to make it kind of really work and be more useful, to be able to more effective and helpful.
When you said that you're able to figure out the different locations and the soul family, or star family rather, some of this information did you get from your downloads from your OBEs?
I guess so. I mean, this is a long time ago, over 30 years ago. It's kind of like partly experiential, partly intuition, and then observation. After drawing over 1,000 charts, it sort of just clarified. Once I understood the genetics, the coding or the angles, the geometry of genetics, then sort of it did become much easier. That comment, or that word amente, is thrown around quite a bit these days. Change the letters around, you get IM10, and there it is. There's the decagon. The cross section of the DNA helix is the decagon. There's enough photos out there to show this. And then you have what they call the halls of records, or the halls of Amente, or the sphere of Amente. These words just mean the etheric or the akashic level of the DNA molecule, the akashic memory records in the etheric level of the DNA helix, and so forth. So we don't need to look outside of ourselves. It's all inside there. We just need to access that. And the astrology is just using astrogenetics and applying that in a very specific, accurate astrophysical, astrogenetic, sacred geometric way to try and extract more of the information which is stored, or reveal it.
Okay, so this skill set is pretty much particular to you. Not anybody's going to be able to do this type of chart.
Not that I've seen on internet. There's a few other versions of galactic astrology which seem like they're pretty much the old astrology with something sort of attached or added on, which it still seems like the old astrology when you go through it and have a look at it. Well, it just happens to be my area of interest, and I've followed through with it. And,
for our listeners that are interested in getting a heliocentric galactic chart, I noticed on your website that there's different options. What's the difference between the different types of charts, and what do most people generally ask for?
I would say 8 out of 10 would ask for the full chart, which also adds a couple of other sort of charts to the main one, and that is like past life experiences and roles that a person's played out, past lives on the planet here on Earth, and then what they call a progress chart. So that's kind of looking at present time and the near future, and plotting or mapping out kind of like a guide for the next 5 to 10 years. So that would be like 80% asked for that one. Then there's just the birth chart or the star seed chart, without the past lives on the earth here and the progress chart, so to say. Then I do another chart, like this is for the younger star seed, perhaps the first time arrivals, and this is like for charts for people under, say, 15 or under 20 or something. And that's a little bit different. I do their chart. There's no need to look at the progressions in the real time. They're a little bit young, but I do a chart progressing as if it's 2033. I do that because the Mayan calendar and the galactic community themselves have said, from their projected vision or view, humanity will spend the 2020s rectifying the problems on the planet. And whatever that entails is beyond me, but everything will sort of change. The old school will have lost its grip, and the positive creative people as a collective will begin to really start to create what we're here to create, a new earth. Okay. And by doing that, and as we're doing that, the galactic community invite humanity then into the galactic community, galactic framework, invite us to join, as it were. So I do a chart for the younger ones, and I do it for the older people if they want to do that. So I do a progress chart to them. I do couples charts if required or if wanted, see kind of what they mean by soul twins and this kind of thing. So you can get a good picture of the interactions between couples and their collective or their couple's role. Just like I said with John and Paul and George there, can definitely add other people into the mix and get a group project. Have a good look at that.
So what would twin flames look like? Would they have the exact same reading?
Oh, no, it's more to do with, well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
My mother and myself and my daughter are at the different nodes on a decagon from my birth date. So there's the family, my mother, myself, and my daughter, incarnating through the timeline, following the same genetic family. And I see this a lot in families. One of my friends, her brother, her mother, her auntie are all born on the decagon nodes, which if you put 1 point of the genetic decagon starting at her birth date, the rest of the family there are born on those nodes. So it doesn't have to be the same chart. It has to be connected up, and it connected up in this pattern of star family genetics. I mean, this is all very abstract to talk about, but the science behind it, I've tried to make that clear as possible on the website. So you start to see, once you've done a few of these, you start to see these kind of connections. It's like looking at two charts, but it lights up and starts to kind of reveal itself. And then you have other aspects that you can add into there. For example, you have John and Yoko, and you have Lancelot and Guinevere. So these names of these characters, these people, they are often what are used for twin flame, twin flame archetypes. Well, these names, John and Yoko, etc., they are the names of asteroids. They have asteroids named after them.
Oh, wow.
Once you start adding these asteroids for these archetypes of twin flames into the charts, then you begin to see these interactions, and it becomes very clear. It's easy enough to see anyway.
So not only could somebody contact you to find out about themselves, they could get a confirmation for soul family or possible twin flames.
Well, this often happens. I'll do one chart for someone, for them, and the feedback's usually pretty amazing. So I'll do their chart, and then they'll say, wow, okay, well, now I want to do my kids' chart, I want to do my husband's chart, etc., etc. So I end up doing the whole family.
Awesome. Gotta love it. Wow. One-stop shopping, right?
Yeah. Feedback's usually amazing, which is good.
I can imagine it is. I'm sure there's a lot of excitement and confirmation and a lot of bliss going on. And your job's got to be quite rewarding.
It is at the end of the day, that's right.
Awesome. So Graham, we're just over an hour, and I was wondering if there's anything that you're itching to share with our listeners that either I didn't ask you about or that you just really want to share before we close out.
I would probably like to share just in addition to some of the things I've sort of said there. And
Sure.
this is like to do with the solar flares, a solar flare cycle, which is mapped out by the Mayan calendar. The Mayan calendar can map the solar flares, not necessarily the dream spell version, but the Tolkien in general. And that's mapping the solar flares, but the solar flares are kind of like receiving energy from both the gamma rays and perhaps some of the pulses in the galactic center. There's already has been found a specific frequency coming from the galactic center, and it hits or reaches the Earth twice every day. It's a sidereal day, so every 718 minutes exactly, the pulse arriving from the galactic center. So the research has been done, and they see there's a relationship to the frequency and the golden ratio. And then there's the discovery of, this is by a guy called Paul Levete, where he discovered that there's a pulse coming through the galaxy. It's coming through from the center of the galaxy. Before we said that the center of the galaxy is connected to other galaxies, and specifically the center galaxy of the cluster, Virgo A cluster. So there's a pulse coming from other galaxies, from the great-great-great-grandmother galaxy. It's pulsing along the DNA or the Kundalini helix, as it were, and it reaches into it comes into the North Pole of our Milky Way, and then it creates like a wave. It's like dropping a stone into the North Pole of the galaxy, and that stone creates ripples, like water ripples, and that pulse then comes out through the galaxy every 25,000 years or so. And this is the heartbeat of the galaxy, and even the broader one there as well. So that is continually happening every 25,000 years ago. Paul Levete's done a lot of research and proven it in a sense. You'd have to look at his work to see his proof. And so what we see as being an ascension or an upgrade, or these topics, the new Earth, etc., is being triggered by an extragalactic source, in a sense. And so it has an extragalactic keyword or template or framework, a foundation. So as we're expanding and growing to become a galactic race, we're also expanding and we'll become interacting with an extragalactic framework as well. I don't even exactly know what that entails and what it all means, but it's going to be fun.
Extragalactic, that term refers to outside of our galaxy.
Yes, because of well, at least the proof I've put together, it shows that our galaxy is just not alone there in intergalactic space. It is connected, just like the chakras in our anatomy are connected together. There's a connection there, and we have to sit and meditate or dance madly, and it'll trigger the Kundalini and link up the chakras. So, at certain points, it's in the cosmos. There's certain events happening, and this is like linking up and threading or linking up the galaxies. But it means the consciousness for us here on the planet, and becoming galactic consciousness, becoming galactic citizens. The galactic citizens are already interacting with extragalactic citizens in other galaxies. That's already there. So once we link up and become a galactic race, as part and parcel of the deal, we become introduced to an extragalactic framework of other races, etc. The entire what they call the Lyra kind of genetics, the framework of the ET races and so forth that we're presented with. I'm imagining you're kind of aware of this. The human genetics, that aspect seeded in Lyra, and then it's spread out to Sirius and Pleiades and Arcturus and so forth, Orion, etc., etc. Well, that whole storyline, if you like, of human genetics, ET involvements, etc., that is just one small neighborhood in the galaxy. If the galaxy is a huge city, then everything that we read about the genetics and the ET families is all just like in one little suburb.
Mm.
And we're about to learn about the rest of the galaxy, the rest of the suburbs, but we're about to interact with other cities, other galaxies, what's going on there as well.
Wow, so we have no idea what to expect.
I haven't come across anybody that has a really good, grounded, practical answer to that one.
Well, thank you, Graham, for sharing that. That was really great. Wow, so there's more ET races than we could even imagine that are out there. So that's 15 years away.
That's a general statement. It may change by a little bit, but that's the general statement I've read.
Okay, so that's within our lifetime, I would think.
Oh, yes, we've incarnated for the party.
You and I both were going to be here in 15 years.
Well, part of the interaction when it takes place, the leaving celebrations and ceremonies of the starseed, even if it was 20,000 years ago, will be recorded in their history, in their holographic, visual, whatever they're using for their memory, to keep their memories, their records. The starseed on the planet here in 15, 20 years will be able to watch the leaving ceremonies. And the lifetimes of the starseed who are not incarnate here, their brothers and sisters that waved goodbye 20,000 Earth years ago, they could still be living the same incarnation, lifetime, as when we left, as the starseed arrived here. So there's a lot in there that's that can come out as
A massive homecoming.
Yeah.
Well, Graham, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. I so appreciate your time, and I appreciate, your skills and your wisdom and everything that you're doing for humanity right now. And I'm loving your posts on Facebook. And even though, I initially told you they're way over my head, I don't want to say that anymore because that just keeps them over my head. So I want to say that they're in alignment with where I am, and I'm beginning to understand them.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm a puzzle piece in this, global wide puzzle, and we've all got to put our contributions in there, and that builds the whole puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're all contributing in our unique skills to make that happen. So thanks very much for the opportunity to be able to share this. It gives me a better idea of putting some ideas together and trying to make it kind of more coherent.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, this has just been phenomenal, and I can't wait for your interview to air. Thank you, everybody, for checking in with me and Graham tonight, and we hope that you thoroughly enjoy this interview, and hopefully we'll plant some seeds, and maybe you could check out Graham's 2 websites, which are www.unifiedfractalfield.com and www.galacticastrologyacademy.com. And you'll find his heliocentric galactic charts there, and they are pretty wild. And thank you again, Graham. I appreciate you immensely.
Thanks so much. There's many links on those websites to other research, which is, where you really want to focus is go and check out what these other researchers and people have done, and to bring it all together to form those, to form that style of astrology. It's a
Yes.
combination.
Thank you again, Graham.
Bye for now.
Alrighty, bye-bye.